welcome to today's deep dive. I'm really glad you're here with us today because we have an incredibly extensive, highly provocative text to unpack.
Yeah, provocative is definitely the right word for it.
Right. And if you're listening to this, you might be looking to deeply understand the historical roots of our modern institutions. Or maybe you're a men's rights activist or consider yourself part of the red-pilled manosphere.
Or maybe just really curious about the ideological battlegrounds shaping the world right now.
Exactly. Because today we are reviewing a comprehensive ebook that claims to uncover the hidden history of our society. It basically argues that modern institutions were fundamentally captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Long before most people even realized what was happening.
Yeah, way before. So if you want to understand the architecture of the modern world from a strict men's rights perspective, this is the ultimate text.
It's a massive, meticulously structured manifesto. The author really leaves no stone unturned here.
Before we get into the thick of it, though, I do need to remind you to please like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us keep bringing you these extensive deep dives.
Definitely.
Today's source material is the ebook The Red Pill, a men's rights manifesto by Conrad Riker. And we highly encourage you to go buy the book on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books.
Yeah, you really need to read it to get the full, unvarnished experience and check out the arguments for yourself.
For sure. And while you're at it, make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack.
So our mission for this deep dive is very clear. We're going to unpack Conrad Riker's manifesto, examining his foundational arguments on evolutionary biology, systemic biases in the legal system, media representation, and the historical roots of gender politics.
But before we jump in, it is absolutely crucial that we issue a clear disclaimer here.
Yes, very important.
Because this material contains highly politically charged content regarding feminism, Marxism, and gender politics, we need to be completely transparent with you, the listener.
We are impartially reporting on the contents of this manifesto to help you understand the author's viewpoint.
Right. We are not taking sides. We want to explicitly clarify we aren't endorsing the viewpoints. We are just acting as your expert guides, analyzing the text.
Exactly. Our goal is synthesis and structural understanding.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the title itself, The Red Pill.
Right out of the 1999 movie The Matrix.
Yeah, where the protagonist has to choose, take the blue pill and stay in a comfortable fabricated reality, or take the red pill and wake up to a harsh truth.
Riker uses this to symbolize waking up to the reality of systemic male marginalization today.
What's fascinating here is how he builds the historical timeline to explain how society got to this point.
He goes all the way back to the foundational roots. He outlines how first-wave feminism was basically a straightforward fight for basic human rights.
Like voting and owning property.
Right. But his thesis is that after World War II, this was fundamentally hijacked by Marxist ideology.
He literally calls Marxism the womb for modern feminism.
It provided the structural framework, teaching the movement about class struggle and power dynamics.
Oppressor versus oppressed. He points to Marx and Engels, and then moves to mid-century thinkers like Simone de Beauvoir.
Who wrote The Second Sex in 1949.
Right, where she argued that women aren't born women, they're produced by their socioeconomic environment.
And that socioeconomic argument is framed by Riker as a direct descendant of Marx's class struggle. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat was just copy-pasted onto gender dynamics.
So instead of wealthy owners and oppressed workers, it became the patriarchy and women.
Exactly. He traces this straight to Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique.
Riker argues her book actively urged women to abandon traditional roles, framing the home not as a partnership, but as a site of systemic oppression.
He characterizes this as the birth of radical feminism and an open war on the nuclear family.
Which had been stable since the Industrial Revolution. And Riker brings in data here, pointing to skyrocketing divorce rates and the normalization of single-parent households.
And he links those trends directly to increases in child poverty and juvenile delinquency.
He even counters the narrative that traditional marriage is economically oppressive by citing a study showing women in traditional marriages have significantly more stable incomes.
They're statistically far less likely to experience poverty over their lifetimes.
It really makes you pause and think. If society applies this Marxist class struggle framework to domestic partnerships, how does that alter human trust?
Right. If you're encouraged to view your relationship through political power dynamics rather than a loving partnership, it's going to breed resentment.
Absolutely. And this shift required a total rejection of innate human biology.
Which brings us perfectly to his next major section on evolutionary biology and psychology.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The manifesto asserts that progressive ideology relies on this blank slate myth, the idea that gender is just a social construct.
Ignoring millions of years of human evolution, Riker makes the case that men and women evolved distinct physical and psychological traits just to survive as hunter-gatherers.
He lists them out specifically. For men, it's greater muscle mass, higher bone density, and a propensity for risk-taking.
And being highly compartmentalized and analytical under stress.
It wasn't socially conditioned, it was a biological necessity for hunting and protecting the tribe.
And women evolved distinct traits optimized for their roles. Wider fields of vision for gathering plants and monitoring the environment for threats to children.
Plus, deep empathic abilities and higher emotional intelligence, crucial for nurturing offspring and keeping the community together.
Riker introduces this great reinterpretation of Pandora's box here.
Yeah, not as a cautionary tale about female curiosity, but representing the undeniable reality of our evolutionary design.
Once you open the box of objective science and genetics, you can't ignore the hardwiring. The truth contradicts the blank slate theory.
He grounds this in modern sociology with the Scandinavian paradox.
This is a really strong point in the book.
Right, because Scandinavian countries have the highest levels of gender equality and freedom of choice. But the opposite of the blank slate theory happens there.
In those egalitarian countries, women still overwhelmingly self-select out of STEM fields and gravitate toward people-oriented professions like nursing.
While men heavily gravitate toward things-oriented professions like engineering and construction, Riker argues this proves that given total freedom, innate biological preferences take over.
He puts a human face on this with the story of Leela, a young woman with immense ambition to serve in a top-tier military combat unit.
But her willpower violently clashed with the biological realities of the physical strength requirements.
Riker uses her story to highlight the physical danger of expecting women to compete on the exact same physiological terms as men.
Lowering physical standards for ideological parity is unsafe and unrealistic. It really pushes you to analyze your own life.
How much of our daily behavior or career choices are driven by ancient evolutionary wiring rather than modern socialization?
The book's core argument is that by denying these biological realities, modern society is gaslighting men, telling them their natural instincts are inherently toxic.
And if society is classifying natural male behavior as toxic, that leads into Riker's next assertion that there is an active war on masculinity.
Waged across 3 specific battlefields: pop culture, the education system, and the corporate workplace. Let's start with media.
The bumbling buffoon trope.
Yes, the scathing critique of how men are portrayed in sitcoms and advertising as either controlling oppressors or completely incompetent idiots who need a woman to save them.
He cites long-running shows like Friends. Ross is an overeducated neurotic fool, and Joey is a dim-witted womanizer.
Or How I Met Your Mother. Barney is manipulative. Ted is an overly sensitive, nice guy lacking masculine fortitude.
Going further back, Homer Simpson and Ray Romano, the ultimate archetypes of the lazy, incompetent father who relies entirely on his hyper-competent wife.
30 years of Homer Simpson slowly erodes cultural respect for the patriarchal figure, and he grounds this in a university study on TV commercials.
The researchers found men were portrayed negatively in nearly 2/3 of all ads analyzed.
While women were depicted as attractive, sensible, and nurturing in 8 out of 10, the manifesto argues this trains young boys to subconsciously associate their gender with incompetence.
He also highlights the 2019 Gillette ad, "We believe the best men can be."
Instead of selling razors, it lectured its male consumer base on toxic masculinity.
Showing vignettes of bullying and harassment. And while mainstream media praised it, there was a visceral backlash from everyday men.
They were exhausted by being painted with a broad brush of villainy. He also touches on female reboots of traditionally male franchises like Ghostbusters,
arguing they intentionally undermine male cultural touchstones.
So that's the media narrative. Now, what happens when a young boy steps into a classroom? The second battlefield, the war on boys.
The modern classroom environment actively penalizes natural male behavior.
On the kindergarten playground, high-energy, physically competitive play is disciplined and medicated, while girls' verbal assertiveness is praised as leadership.
Riker shares the story of Tom, a boy who naturally loved math and engineering, but felt completely alienated by high school.
His advanced classes were taught by female educators who subconsciously catered to a more feminine, collaborative style of learning.
Tom's competitive analytical approach was discouraged. He felt he didn't belong in subjects he was biologically predisposed to excel in.
And at the university level, it intensifies. Universities mandate feminist literature and queer theory courses, but offer zero support or dedicated coursework focused on the male experience.
Which leads right into the third battlefield, the corporate workplace, the feminization of work.
Riker takes direct aim at the wage gap statistic, the idea that women make 77 cents for every dollar a man makes.
He explicitly calls it a statistical myth used for political leverage.
It ignores crucial factors like individual job choices, hours worked per week, willingness to commute, and taking on dangerous roles.
When economists control for those variables, the real number closes to about 98 cents to the dollar.
The remaining gap is largely due to individual lifestyle choices, not systemic corporate sexism. He brings in real-world case studies here.
Like John, a highly competent, middle-aged employee fired simply to make way for a less experienced female employee to meet a diversity quota.
Or Harvey, a senior tech manager known for demanding absolute excellence.
He was formally accused of creating a hostile work environment because his direct, competitive leadership style clashed with modern corporate sensitivities prioritizing emotional comfort.
Riker also brings in the concept of the glass cliff. Women elevated to leadership roles during times of corporate crisis, setting them up for a higher probability of failure.
He uses it to illustrate the chaos of prioritizing diversity metrics over pure meritocracy.
So how did these theories get so entrenched? Riker traces this institutional capture to the weaponization of academic ideologies, specifically critical theory and queer theory.
He deconstructs queer theory first, explaining how traditional feminism incorporated thinkers like Michel Foucault and Judith Butler.
Wait, let's clarify this for anyone who hasn't taken graduate-level sociology. The book talks a lot about Butler's concept of gender performativity. What exactly does that mean? Are we talking about literal acting?
That's a great point of clarification. In this context, gender performativity is the theory that gender is not an innate biological reality, but a series of repetitive actions and societal scripts you perform every day.
So society constructs the illusion of biological gender.
Exactly. Riker argues that by treating gender as a performance, academics entirely dismiss the hard science of biology and genetics we talked about earlier.
And the manifesto argues these theories were twisted into a cultural weapon. He specifically targets intersectionality.
Claiming it's been manipulated into a rigid hierarchy of victimhood.
Right. Any issue affecting men, like suicide rates, the military draft, or false accusations, is dismissed, because men are categorized at the top of the oppressor hierarchy.
If an ideology views you inherently as the oppressor, your individual suffering is rendered completely invisible.
This ties into his critique of critical theory. Originally meant to question hidden power structures, Riker asserts it's been hijacked.
Now it's an authoritarian cudgel to enforce progressive orthodoxy about gender and race. Anyone who questions it is severely punished.
Which brings us to the severe threat to free speech. Riker gives high-profile examples of this chilling effect, like James Damore.
The software engineer fired by Google.
He wrote an internal memo citing mainstream evolutionary biology to explain the gender gap in tech. He wasn't inciting violence, he was citing established science.
But he challenged the progressive orthodoxy of HR, so he was fired and smeared in the press as a bigot.
Riker also cites Professor Peter R. Wood. He merely suggested in an academic forum that white privilege might be more accurately rooted in economic and class differences.
He was immediately labeled a white supremacist by student groups and nearly lost his career.
Riker backs this up with data, citing a study that showed Facebook actively censored conservative-leaning websites 61 times faster than liberal ones, proving a systemic algorithmic bias.
It really creates a massive chilling effect.
Think about your own daily life. Have you ever been at work or on social media and actively stopped yourself from sharing a fact-based opinion because you were terrified the woke thought police would label you a misogynist and ruin your livelihood?
Riker argues this pervasive self-censorship is quietly destroying the free exchange of ideas that built Western civilization.
And the consequences become most severe when the book turns to the legal and justice systems. This is a major pivot.
Moving from cultural critique to hard, systemic legal disparities that literally destroy men's lives.
It's an incredibly heavy section. The statistics are staggering. Riker dives into the modern epidemic of false accusations. He notes that in a single recent year, 12,000 men in the U.S. were wrongfully accused of rape.
He points to a study by the Defense Lawyers Association showing that out of 1,000 sexual assault cases reviewed, Nearly half were based on false or fabricated accusations.
He layers in more data, showing that 41% of allegations in another dataset were entirely unfounded.
Even using conservative estimates of 2.5 to 3% for malicious false accusations, that translates to thousands of innocent men whose lives are decimated every single year.
The text puts human faces to these numbers. The nightmare of John Doe, a university student publicly vilified and expelled by a Title IX tribunal without basic legal representation.
The truth eventually cleared him, but his reputation was permanently scarred by internet search results.
And Jim, a highly successful tech executive, a disgruntled employee accused him of misconduct. Despite his consistent insistence of innocence, he was fired by a panicked board.
His industry reputation destroyed overnight. The accuser later recanted during depositions, admitting she fabricated it for financial leverage. But Jim had already lost everything.
Then there's Mark, a blue-collar construction worker accused by a coworker without a shred of evidence. The mere whisper led to social ostracization and the ruin of his local career, completely circumventing due process.
Riker argues movements like Me Too and Time's Up have mutated into weaponized witch hunts.
Dismantling the foundational concept of innocent until proven guilty specifically for men. Due process replaced by digital mob rule.
And this systemic bias infects family law too, the historical tender years doctrine.
The 19th century principle assuming children are always better off with their mothers. Riker argues this foundational bias still informally infects modern family courts.
The numbers are bleak. Men lose primary physical custody an astounding 82% of the time. Fathers win sole custody in only about 10% of contested cases.
The grim conclusion is that 90% of the time, capable fathers are relegated to weekend visitors or financial ATMs, systematically alienated from their children's daily lives by a court system that views men primarily as walking wallets.
In the criminal justice system, he highlights a glaring sentencing disparity. Men routinely receive significantly longer, harsher prison sentences than women convicted of the exact same crimes under the same circumstances.
That bias is why men make up over 90% of the prison population. Riker raises a provocative question. Why is society quick to view disparities affecting women as proof of oppression, but completely ignores the blatant systemic bias against men in the justice system?
He also brings up a heavily suppressed 2012 study on intimate partner violence.
Finding roughly 12 million women and 12 million men experience some form of it in their lifetimes. A near-perfect statistical parity.
But mainstream media maintains absolute silence regarding male victims.
Because acknowledging them disrupts the progressive narrative that men are always oppressors and women are always victims.
If we synthesize this entire architecture, the media mockery, educational alienation, workplace quotas, suppression of free speech, and severe legal biases, we arrive at what Riker defines as the silent crisis.
A devastating, sweeping crisis of men's physical and mental health that is deliberately ignored. The statistics are a sobering wake-up call. Men make up 93% of all workplace fatalities and 91% of severe injuries.
Doing the highly dangerous, back-breaking jobs like deep-sea fishing, logging, and mining that keep civilization functioning.
Yet their physical sacrifices are invented to the culture. The average life expectancy for men is a full 5 years less than for women, attributed to societal stress and lack of medical funding for male-centric health issues.
The mental health crisis is perhaps the most tragic aspect. Men account for an astounding 75% of all suicides globally.
Riker tells the story of Jeffrey, a man who wore a flawless mask of joy at work and home, but secretly hid a profound depression.
Because society expects men to be perfectly stoic and suppress emotional needs, Jeffrey felt he had nowhere to turn for empathy, eventually taking his own life in isolation.
He mentions Steve, a construction worker killed on the job due to inadequate safety precautions. Riker frames his death through the lens of the intense pressure placed on men to act as the sole financial provider,
forcing them to accept dangerous conditions because their societal worth is tied entirely to their utility.
To cope with this relentless stress and legal alienation, millions of men turn to substance abuse, pointing out that 330,000 men are admitted to rehab facilities each year in the U.S. alone.
This isn't a moral failing, but a desperate coping mechanism for a society that offers no inherent emotional support.
This profound silent crisis is the pressure cooker that birthed the modern red pill movement. The book traces its origins from late 90s pickup artist communities to massive, uncensored online forums.
As societal pressures mounted, these digital spaces evolved into a vital survival space, a sanctuary where men could anonymously discuss the realities of unfair alimony, biased child custody, and the epidemic of false accusations.
Riker shares stories of men who found genuine salvation and brotherhood in this community. Like Alex, struggling with his identity in a society that devalued traditional masculine virtues like aggression and competition.
The red pill community allowed him to embrace his natural masculinity without shame.
And John, going through a bitter, legally biased divorce, he found tactical legal advice and camaraderie from men who had survived the family court meat grinder, helping him win joint custody of his kids.
This brings us to the final chapters, Riker's ultimate vision for the future. He is explicitly clear that the true end goal of the red pill movement is not male supremacy or subjugation of women.
Or a return to the 1950s. His vision is a return to a true, unyielding meritocracy, where individuals are judged entirely on their objective competence and character, not their placement on an intersectional victimhood hierarchy.
He advocates for sweeping legal reform, demanding that shared 50-50 parenting become the legal default in family courts.
Ensuring fathers remain legally protected and active in their children's lives. And the manifesto gives highly actionable advice. Riker urges men to direct their financial resources to organizations fighting these battles on the ground.
Like the Men's Health Network, to demand equal funding for male health crises.
And the National Parenting Organization, which lobbies aggressively for family court reform and fathers' rights.
And the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or FIRE, to protect free speech and due process on college campuses.
Ultimately, the book demands society stop demonizing men and start actively celebrating healthy traditional masculinity, the physical courage, provision, and protection that built human civilization in the first place.
It is a sweeping, comprehensive, and undeniably provocative roadmap, challenging almost every facet of the modern progressive consensus.
Riker is asking his readers to completely deconstruct the societal narratives they've been taught since childhood, look unblinkingly at the raw data and legal disparities, and actively demand a new system that respects the legal rights and inherent nature of men.
It's undeniably a text that forces the reader to confront very uncomfortable statistics and countercultural narratives rarely discussed in mainstream society.
What an absolutely monumental deep dive this has been. We've traversed the incredible breadth of Conrad Riker's dense manifesto, tracing the roots of modern feminism to Marxist class struggle, exploring evolutionary biology to reject the blank slate myth, and mapping the active war on masculinity across media, education, and corporate quotas.
We delved into his critique of weaponized ideologies like queer theory, the chilling effect on free speech, the horrifying statistics surrounding false legal accusations, and the deeply biased family courts.
And unpacked the silent, deadly crisis of men's health that catalyzed the modern red pill movement. Before we close out this extensive analysis, I want to leave you with a final, highly provocative thought to mull over.
Building on the foundational themes of Riker's work, but looking toward the technological horizon.
Right. If, as the manifesto strongly argues, evolutionary biology has deeply, immutably hardwired men to be the physical protectors, builders, and primary providers of society, how will the rapid rise of artificial intelligence and fully automated robotic labor forces force us to redefine the core utility of masculinity in the 21st century?
That is a profound philosophical question.
If the highly dangerous physical jobs and intensely analytical tasks are outsourced to machines, how do men fulfill that ancient biological imperative? That is an incredibly complex question for you to ponder as you look at the men in your life and the future of our society.
Looking toward that unpredictable intersection of ancient gender dynamics and hyper-advanced technology.
As we finally wrap up this incredible session, I need to remind you one more time to please like and subscribe to the show so you never miss an extensive deep dive like this one.
Remember, to truly grasp the incredible depth, verify the hard statistics, and fully digest these counterculture arguments, you absolutely need to read the source material for yourself.
Go buy the ebook, The Red Pill, a men's rights manifesto by Conrad Riker. It is available right now on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books. And be sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for more of his ongoing unfiltered content.
Thank you for joining us as we unpack the architecture of this incredibly complex text.
Thank you so much for listening. We will see you on the next deep dive.